Hi, my name's Glenn and welcome to my boat project. I've been restoring a 1971 Aquarius 21 trailer sailor for the past 4 years and 2 months. And in this episode, I'm going to put all the finishing touches on the boat so I can get her out on the water sailing. Let's take a look. All right, this is the reinforcement I did on the inside of the transom. So those are some aluminum L brackets, and this is what I did on the outside of the transom because there's way too much flexibility when the motor was sitting on its mount and also moving. I had a bunch of hardware to install on the top. In fact, all of the hardware I had. So what I did was I over drilled, and then I filled with some polyester resin. I stopped using epoxy a little bit ago because it cost twice as much as polyester, and I was finding that the polyester works just fine. So this is the drill and fill method. I drilled a big hole, I fill with resin. When it cures, I drill a smaller hole in which to put my hardware through. Didn't take long to wise up and realize a syringe is a much better way to go to fill these holes. And my cabin top was not very squishy, but some of the wood I got out of there seemed wet. Now I'm fitting my bow pulpit. So I bought this bow pulpit a few years ago. And now let's look down into the head. We have some nice ventilation in the head. Starting to wrap things up. I have some touch-up painting to do, as you can see by the sole of the cockpit there. Now here I am customizing that bow pulpit. I need to remove this triangle of metal there so I can bend the bars so it can be wider. Just getting rid of all the sharp edges. I polished it as best I could, and I didn't show you bending of the metal, but that is exactly what I did to get it to fit in place. You can kind of see the bend at the top there. And now I'm working on the rub rail. I took my rub rail off when I first took everything off the outside of the boat and sanded it all down, and I had it off when I was painting. And I figured I would deal with it when the time came. I looked into buying a new one. It was going to be anywhere from $400 to $500. So I started looking around for other options. And what I found was this lovely PVC siding. This is PVC board, and it cuts really easily, though I must say I hated it. It stunk, and all the debris stuck to me because of the static cling. But I inset some holes. I cut 45-degree angles so it could wrap around the boat nicely. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to use PVC instead of wood was because it's more flexible. I knew that I could curve around the curves of my boat pretty easily, and I was also able to bend the front around the nose of the boat, around the bow. And I'm using a heat gun here. Something, if you've never used a heat gun, just make sure you do a little at a time in each area. You keep it moving. You don't want to keep it focused at one place, or else you'll make one spot way too hot. You might even burn it. So I had to keep moving around, and you want to warm it up so you can bend it, but you don't want to push it too fast because then it might break. And I was extremely lucky, and I think this PVC is pretty forgiving. So once I had it all bent, then I finished tacking it down with some screws that went in through the deck hull joint. There's some wood behind there, some teak on the other side, so that's what these screws were screwing into. I was pretty excited there. This is what it looks like. It's not as clean and white and pretty as I would have liked. I put some caulking in the groove, and then I put some primer and paint over it because PVC does not withstand UV rays very well. This is my sail. I wanted to stretch it out because it has that big gap there. It's really loose fabric, and the rope along the edges, I thought if I got it wet and stretched it out for several hours, like 24, then I might be able to use that sail. And I had some windows to make. So this is smoked acrylic with paper over it. I traced out the size I needed. I put a 1.5-inch ring around the outside of what I actually needed to give me some material to attach it to the boat with. And you first saw me trying to use my table saw, but that didn't work very well. It was chipping the plastic. And I found my jigsaw worked really well with a metal blade on. They do make blades for acrylic, but I didn't have one. I tried the blade for cutting metal, and it worked just fine. And then I just smoothed out the edges with my sander here, my belt sander, and then I used the palm sander to smooth it out a little bit more to get more of a rounded edge. Also went over it with my router to round out the outside edge a little bit more and more consistently than a sander could do. I stripped off 1.5 inches of paper that is going to be used for the attachment site, and I wanted to rough it up with sandpaper so the tape and caulking could stick to it a little bit better. And this is the double-sided tape I used. It's made by 3M, works great, really easy to work with. It cuts quite easily. In order to put my window on the boat, I needed to make this little rest so I could have it at the right height, and that would help with my alignment. Now, one thing I didn't do, but I recommend, is put a line on the outside, maybe a piece of tape on the outside of the window that lines up with a similar marking on the side of the boat, so you can line it up from the outside without having to be on the inside to see if you have it lined up. And this is the finished product. Ta-da! Now I have a mess to clean up and got a lot of junk in my trunk. When I attached my hardware and all the fixtures, I of course wanted to make sure water didn't get into the through the holes, either into the wood inside or drip down into the cabin. So I used butyl tape, which worked quite nicely. It was pretty easy to work with. It doesn't make a big mess like caulking does. It's a little bit hard to get that paper off, but not too bad because there is an overhang on the side. So what I normally would do is use my knife that I used to cut it to just kind of grab that edge and pull it up. I don't have the greatest dexterity. To help find the hole, I poked a hole with the nail. That also reduced some of the resistance of shoving the screw through, or the bolt, in whichever case it was. So I had some vice grips holding the nut on the other end. So as I screwed this down, the vice grips seized the nut. Now I have to make a holder for my mast as I drive, as I travel with it. So this is going to be on the transom, and what I used is a pipe within a pipe. So that small pipe on the right goes inside the larger pipe on the left, and you will see the finished product in a little bit. You saw the elbow at first, and that's to keep this smaller pipe from going all the way through. I could have used a cap, but an elbow was the same cost, and it allows water to drain out. So this is my Y. I call it a mast catcher because as the mast is coming down, it's pretty wide and will catch. It also has the roller because the mast does need to roll forward and back as you're getting ready to step it and unstep it. The fact that it swivels is insignificant. It doesn't matter one way or the other. There's my professional spacer there. That's a piece of wood that is cut in half. And after I cleaned up all the long bolts protruding through the nuts, I cleaned the entire cabin. I vacuumed, I wiped it again, wiped it with a wet cloth, then with a dry cloth, and then I did it again to get rid of all the fiberglass dust. That strip of fiberglass is there because I was originally planning on tabbing the furniture to the hull, but I think what I'll do instead is just caulk the gap and fill it in with paint. Now that rectangle was a cardboard box that stained. I don't know why. I guess it got a little bit wet, but it won't clean off now, so I guess I'm stuck with it. But I do like that I don't have those hole in the head hazards anymore. Oh, there's my head, ready for use. Just needs a bucket. All in all, I'm pretty happy with it. It's far from done and perfection, but it's definitely ready to go. I could sleep in this if I wanted. There's room for people to sit and lie down, plenty of room for storage. I attempted to put the Aquarius symbol stenciled on the side of the boat and her name, Comfortably Numb. So I got these stencils and I went over it with a roller, and it turned out really crummy. Look how fuzzy that is. It bled underneath. And then when I took the stencil off of the name, it looked really, really bad. I mean, it almost couldn't look worse unless you see the other side, because it was that bad. Really embarrassingly horrible. So I wiped it all off. Fortunately, I got to it soon enough while the paint was still a little bit wet. I also wanted to paint the boot stripe around it because it was looking a little bit messed up from some of the other things I had done on the boat. And there was some bleed through with my electrical tape that I used. And I used electrical tape because it's the right width. I did a lot better the first time around. I think also I cared more. I was taking a little more time. Now I just want to get the boat out in the water. I tried stenciling a second time. I cleaned off all the paint and glue from the backside, sprayed on some more batting spray. This is supposed to be temporary spray glue adhesive. And then I tried an aerosol spray can instead of a roller. And I thought that would do a much better job. And in fact, it did do a better job. Let's see it coming off here. I peeled it right away before the paint had a chance to dry. And it looked much better. Not great, but much better. A little bit of overspray I had to clean off. And even though it was only on for a few minutes, it tore off some of that fresh paint that I had previously used to touch up areas that needed it. So that cleaned off nicely. I'll put some more touch-up paint on there. There's my gin pole. Putting in the standing rigging. Yeah, that looks okay. It's tolerable. I'll go over the edges with some white paint. And we see the mast all the way in its back position with the bottom in the step. So all I have to do is pull it up with the gin pole. And my tiny little motor. Didn't realize how small it was until I saw it on the back of the boat. She's hooked up and ready to go. And this is my rig for my gin pole. I have a couple pulleys here that I will be able to run back and lift the mast while standing in the cockpit. A few minor touches to make on the gin pole to make it right. I need to find a way to hold it onto the cable so it doesn't fall down like that, and also so it doesn't slip. The mast is about 21 feet long. Looking good, getting excited. She's going sailing tomorrow. And there you have it. Those were the final details I really needed to do in order to get the boat out on the water. One thing I didn't show you was all the work I put into getting the motor running. I have a two-stroke motor and it just wouldn't start. and wouldn't start and wouldn't start. I had a lot of people look at it, and finally, with just enough fiddling, I can't even tell you what it finally was, but I just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it, watching videos and fiddling and trying and trying and trying. I finally got the thing to work. So I'm gonna go sailing within a few more days here and see if it floats. No, I know it'll float, but it's gonna be a shakedown cruise, because I'm sure there's all kinds of things that I have forgotten and didn't think of, and maybe some things are not going to work out. So my next video is going to be getting that boat out on the water. So stick around for my next video when I launch Comfortably Numb.